I need you to imagine something that defies everything you think you know about World War I snipers. A man crawls into no man's land at night, not with a spotter, not with backup, alone. He buries himself in mud and shell craters between two armies that want him dead. He waits there for hours, sometimes days, completely motionless while wounded soldiers scream around him and artillery shells shake the ground. And when a German helmet finally appears 300 yards away, he fires once. The target drops. Then he disappears like smoke. He does this 378 times. Confirmed kills. More than any sniper from any nation in World War I. More than the famous German ace snipers. More than the British legends. More than anyone. But here's what will shock you. When this man, this ghost who the Germans feared and couldn't catch, finally returned home, his own country didn't even consider him a citizen. His name was Francis Pegahmagabow. And if you want to understand how one man became a legend on the battlefield while being invisible to his own nation, stay with me. Because this story goes places you won't expect. March 9, 1891. A baby is born on what's now the Shawanaga First Nation Reserve near Georgian Bay, Ontario. His Ojibwe name is Binaswi, the wind that blows off. Francis Pegahmagabow's life starts with loss. When he's only 3 years old, his father Michael dies. His mother Mary, gravely ill herself, leaves the reservation without him. Some accounts say she died. Others say she returned to her family in the Henvey Inlet First Nation. Either way, young Francis is left behind. An elder named Noah Nebimaniquad takes him in. Noah had also raised Francis's father when he was orphaned. Now he does the same for the grandson. And Noah teaches Francis the old ways, the skills that will one day make him the most feared soldier in the trenches of France. Francis learns to hunt silently through the forests around Georgian Bay. Noah teaches him patience, how to wait motionless for hours until prey makes a single mistake, how to track animals by reading signs others miss, how to move through terrain without sound, how to become invisible. Noah also teaches him Anishinaabe spirituality alongside Roman Catholicism. Francis grows up understanding both worlds, the spiritual traditions of his ancestors and the Catholic faith brought by European settlers. This dual spirituality will shape everything about who he becomes. At 12, Francis drops out of school. Not because he can't learn, he'll later teach himself to read and write English as an adult, a rare achievement for his generation. He leaves because his family needs money. He works in lumber camps. He works as a fisherman on the Great Lakes. Eventually, he becomes a marine firefighter on the massive freighters that move cargo across Georgian Bay. It's hard work, dangerous work, the kind that turns boys into men fast. In 1914, during a stop at an Ojibwa camp near Rossport on Lake Superior, something happens that Francis will remember for the rest of his life. He's gathering blueberries with other crew members when an old woman recognizes him. She approaches and hands him something, a small leather medicine pouch. Years later, Francis describes what she tells him to anthropologist Diamond Jennis. She said I would shortly go into great danger. The bag was of skin, tightly bound with a leather thong. Sometimes it seemed to be hard as a rock. At other times it appeared to contain nothing. What was really inside, I do not know. Francis keeps that pouch. He doesn't know yet, but within weeks, his life will change forever. August 1914. Britain declares war on Germany. Canada, as part of the British Empire, is automatically at war too. Recruitment stations open across the country. Young men line up to volunteer, swept up in enthusiasm and patriotic fervor. They think the war will be over by Christmas. They think it will be an adventure. The Canadian government has a policy about Indigenous people enlisting. Don't. Aboriginal Canadians weren't even citizens. They had no right to vote. Indian agents appointed by the government controlled their lives and made decisions for their communities. The military doesn't want them, doesn't think they're suitable, doesn't believe they can be proper soldiers. Francis Pegahmagabow volunteers anyway. August 13th, 1914, just 9 days after war is declared. 23 years old, he walks into a recruitment station and signs up for the 23rd Regiment, also called the Northern Pioneers. The recruiter is surprised. This wasn't supposed to happen. The editor of the Parry Sound North Star newspaper, William Ireland, writes about it. His grandfather was a warrior and chief and fought for the British in 1812. So the boy comes by his fighting instincts from a long line of ancestors who fought in the Indian Wars. We are all hoping Francis will distinguish himself, as his forefathers did, and will return home covered with glory and medals. His example might well be followed. Francis transfers to the 1st Canadian Infantry Battalion within weeks. He's shipped to England for training, then to France by February 1915. He arrives on Salisbury Plain for trench warfare instruction, learning how to fight a kind of war that no one in human history had experienced before. The medicine pouch goes with him. He wears it in the trenches. He never tells anyone what's inside. He never opens it. His fellow soldiers start calling him Peggy because they can't pronounce Pegahmagabow. But they quickly learn something else. This quiet Ojibwe soldier with the unpronounceable name is the best shot any of them have ever seen. April 22nd, 1915, the Second Battle of Ypres, Belgium. Francis Pegahmagabow is in the trenches with the 1st Canadian Infantry Battalion when something happens that changes warfare forever. Late afternoon, French colonial troops on their left flank suddenly start screaming and running backward. At first, the Canadians think it's a retreat, a collapse in discipline. Then they see it, a yellow-green cloud rolling across no man's land, like fog, but wrong, moving against the wind, hugging the ground, and wherever it touches, men die. Chlorine gas, the first large-scale chemical weapon attack in history. The Germans have released it from 6,000 canisters along a 4-mile front. It drifts into Allied trenches and does things to human bodies that soldiers have no words for. Men drown in their own blood as their lungs dissolve. They claw at their throats. They go blind. They suffocate while still breathing. The French colonial troops break and run, not from cowardice, but because they're dying. The Canadians, including Francis's battalion, suddenly find their entire left flank exposed. If the Germans advance now, they'll roll up the entire Allied line. Canadian commanders don't know what to do. There's no defense against this, no protocol, no equipment. Someone suggests urinating on cloth and holding it over your face. The ammonia might neutralize the chlorine. It barely works. Francis and his battalion hold the line. For 3 days, they fight in conditions that belong in hell, not Earth. The gas attacks come again and again. Half their battalion is wiped out, dead, wounded, or permanently damaged by chlorine exposure. Francis breathes the gas. It scars his lungs permanently. For the rest of his life, the damage will get worse. By the 1950s, he'll have to sleep sitting upright because lying down causes his lungs to fill with fluid. But during those 3 days at Ypres, something else happens. Francis doesn't just survive, he excels. While other soldiers freeze or panic, he moves through the chaos like it's exactly where he's supposed to be. He volunteers for the most dangerous jobs, carrying messages between headquarters and frontline units through artillery fire and gas clouds. Communications in 1915 trenches are primitive, no radios. If you need to send orders or intelligence, someone has to physically run through hell to deliver it. Most message runners die within weeks. Francis not only survives, he succeeds every time. His commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Frank Creighton, writes this about him. He carried messages with great bravery and success during the whole of the actions at Ypres, Festubert, and Givenchy. In all his work, he has consistently shown a disregard for danger, and his faithfulness to duty is highly commendable. Creighton nominates Francis for the Distinguished Conduct Medal, the second highest award for gallantry in the British Army. But headquarters downgrades it. Instead, Francis becomes one of the first 78 Canadian soldiers awarded the newly created military medal. He's also promoted to Lance Corporal on August 26, 1915. But it's his other skill that begins to create a legend, the skill Noah taught him as a boy in the forests of Georgian Bay. Francis becomes a sniper. Battalion commanders notice what soldiers who hunt already know. Francis can see things others miss. His patience is inhuman. He can hold absolutely still for hours. And when he shoots, he doesn't miss. The Ross rifle he's issued is infamous. Canadian soldiers hate it because it jams constantly in trench conditions. Most men try to swap it for a British Lee Enfield. Francis keeps his Ross rifle and uses it to kill 378 Germans. Here's how sniping works in World War I. You don't shoot from your own trench. That's suicide. Enemy snipers will triangulate your position and artillery will flatten it. Instead, you go into no man's land, at night, alone. You crawl past the barbed wire, past the bodies, past wounded men crying for help who you can't help, because revealing yourself means death. You find a shell crater or rubble pile and you bury yourself in it. You use mud, debris, pieces of uniform, anything to break up your outline. Then you wait, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. You can't move, can't eat, can barely breathe. If you need to relieve yourself, you do it where you lie, and you watch the enemy trench 300 yards away through your scope, waiting for one mistake, a helmet edge above the parapet, a silhouette against the sky, a careless soldier who thinks he's safe. Francis does this hundreds of times. He becomes so good at it that stories spread on both sides of the trenches. German soldiers start to fear the ghost in no man's land who appears from nowhere and kills with one shot. But Francis isn't just a sniper, he's also a scout, gathering intelligence on enemy positions, movements, fortifications. Sometimes he doesn't just watch the German trenches, he enters them. The son of a soldier who served with Francis later writes this: Pegahmagabow would infiltrate enemy trenches at night and stand among sleeping German soldiers, just for the experience. Sometimes he'd cut pieces from their uniforms as souvenirs. Then he'd slip back out like he was never there. Whether Francis did this as a combat tactic or a spiritual exercise, nobody knows. What's documented is that he believed he lived a charmed life, that the medicine pouch protected him, that his ancestors watched over him. Maybe they did, because in a war where the average life expectancy for a message runner is weeks and a sniper is months, Francis survives years. If you're finding this story incredible and you want to hear more true stories like this, where history defies belief, do me a favor right now. Leave a comment below telling me which war hero you'd like me to cover next. It helps the algorithm show this video to more people who appreciate real history. And subscribe because I've got dozens more stories like this coming. June 1916, Battle of Mount Sorrel. Francis has developed a reputation. His fellow soldiers treat him with a mixture of respect and superstition. He survives situations that kill everyone around him. He takes missions that are borderline suicide and comes back unscathed. Word spreads beyond his battalion. Francis isn't just carrying a medicine pouch. He's chewing on dead twigs during combat. An Ojibwe custom for protection. Soldiers who witness him doing this start asking him to perform spiritual rituals before battles. Some request his presence near them during assaults, believing his spiritual protection extends to those nearby. There's a story, impossible to verify but recorded by multiple sources, about Francis and a black dog. During heavy fog that stalls an Allied advance, soldiers report seeing him follow a black dog through the mist. Some interpret it as a spirit guide. Others think it's battlefield hallucination. Francis never confirms or denies it. What's not a story is his combat record. At Mount Sorrel, he captures dozens of German prisoners. His tactics are brilliant. He uses his tracking skills, learned at hunting in Ontario, to figure out routes Germans use to cross no man's land. Then he ambushes them. Sometimes he doesn't kill. He fires a warning shot at a soldier's feet, spraying dirt. When the soldier freezes in shock, Francis emerges from his hide and takes him prisoner. Over the course of the war, he captures approximately 300 German soldiers this way, 300 prisoners, 378 confirmed kills. And remember, Francis works alone, no spotter to verify his kills. This becomes a point of controversy after the war. Some historians question the numbers because there's no second witness, but his fellow soldiers don't question it. They watch him leave the trench at night and return at dawn with intelligence, prisoners, or simply a nod that means another enemy sniper won't be shooting at them anymore. September 1916, Battle of the Somme. The Somme is a meat grinder. The British Army loses 60,000 casualties on the first day, killed or wounded in 6 hours. That's one soldier every second. The offensive drags on for months. Over 1 million total casualties by the time it ends. Francis is shot in the left leg during Somme operations. The wound is serious. He's evacuated to England. Doctors discuss amputation. Francis refuses. He begins an active letter-writing campaign to return to active duty, bombarding his superiors with requests to get back to France. His medical chart includes this note: had bleeding from ears, plus more at that time, but was sent back into line the following day. That's not a typo. Francis was wounded badly enough that he was bleeding from his ears, possibly from concussion or blast injury, and he was back in combat the next day. By mid-1917, he's returned to the 1st Battalion. He's promoted to corporal again, and he immediately goes back to doing what he does best, disappearing into no man's land and killing Germans. November 6th to 7th, 1917, Battle of Passchendaele. If the Somme is hell, Passchendaele is something worse. The battlefield isn't mud, it's liquid. Shell craters fill with water deep enough to drown in. Wounded soldiers slide into them and vanish. The landscape is so broken that reinforcements get lost trying to find the front line. The Canadian Corps is ordered to assault Passchendaele village. The attack involves crawling through waterlogged shell craters under machine gun fire. 20,000 Canadian soldiers advance. 16,000 become casualties. Francis's role isn't to assault, it's to coordinate. During the battle, he's recorded maintaining contact with units on both flanks, running between positions, advising commanders, ensuring everyone knows where friendly units are. When reinforcements arrive and become disoriented in the nightmare landscape, Francis personally guides them to their positions. His citation for this action reads, "At Passchendaele, November 6th-7th, 1917, this NCO did excellent work. Before and after the attack, he kept in touch with the flanks, advising the units he had seen, this information proving the success of the attack and saving valuable time in consolidating." He's awarded his first bar to the military medal. This means he now has 2 military medals. Only 39 Canadian soldiers in the entire war received 2 bars. Francis is one of them. But the war keeps grinding. By late 1917, he's diagnosed with pneumonia, probably related to his gas-damaged lungs. He's out of action until May 1918. He writes letters from hospital demanding to return. Again, summer 1918, the war's final phase. Germany launches massive spring offensives, throwing everything they have left at the Western Front. They gain ground initially, but American troops are arriving in huge numbers now. The tide is shifting. Francis is back with his battalion, still sniping, still scouting, still taking risks that should have killed him years ago. August 30th, 1918. Battle of the Scarpe near Oryx Trench close to Upton Wood. Francis's company is in serious trouble. They're nearly out of ammunition. German counterattacks are intensifying. If the ammunition runs out, they'll be overrun and slaughtered or captured. Francis makes a decision. He goes over the top, leaves the relative safety of the trench, and runs into no man's land under heavy machine gun and rifle fire. He's carrying ammunition crates, multiple trips, shells exploding around him, bullets kicking up dirt at his feet. He brings back enough ammunition to enable his post to hold and assist in repulsing the German counterattacks. His citation for his second bar to the military medal reads, "During the operations of August 30th, 1918, at Oryx Trench near Upton Wood, when his company were almost out of ammunition and in danger of being surrounded, this NCO went over the top under heavy MG and rifle fire and brought back sufficient ammunition to enable the post to carry on and assist in repulsing heavy enemy counterattacks." Francis is now one of only 39 Canadian soldiers to receive the military medal with 2 bars. He's the most highly decorated Aboriginal soldier in Canadian history. He's credited with more confirmed kills than any sniper on either side of the war. But something is breaking. 3 years of trench warfare, 3 years of watching friends die, 3 years of chlorine gas damage slowly destroying his lungs, 3 years of living in the space between life and death. By early November 1918, Francis begins having disciplinary problems. He's exhausted. His medical records note exhaustion psychosis. Today we'd call it PTSD or combat stress reaction. Back then, they just called it shell shock and treated it as weakness. Francis is sent to England. He's there when the armistice is signed on November 11th, 1918. The war is over. He survived. Against odds that should have been mathematically impossible, Francis Pegahmagabow survived 4 years of the worst warfare in human history. He returns to Canada in 1919, a hero, the most decorated Aboriginal soldier in Canadian history, one of the most effective combat soldiers of any nationality in World War I, a legend, and Canada still doesn't consider him a citizen. Francis comes home to the Wasauksing First Nation near Georgian Bay. He's 28 years old. He's watched half his battalion die multiple times over. His lungs are permanently damaged from gas exposure. He has nightmares. He has what we now know as post-traumatic stress. But at least the fighting is over, right? Wrong. The Canada that Francis returned to in 1919 wasn't the Canada he'd fought for. Indigenous people still weren't citizens. They still couldn't vote. Indian agents appointed by the government still controlled their communities, their money, their decisions. The Indian Act of 1867 was still in force, a law designed to eliminate indigenous culture and force assimilation. It banned traditional ceremonies. It gave the government power to remove children from families and send them to residential schools. It placed white administrators in charge of every First Nation. Francis had been accepted as an equal on the battlefield. White Canadian soldiers had called him Peggy, relied on him, trusted him with their lives. In combat, nobody cared about race. They cared about who could shoot straight and who had courage. But back home, Francis was a second-class person under the law. He could have accepted it, stayed quiet, been grateful he survived. But Francis Pegahmagabow hadn't survived by accepting impossible situations. He'd survived by fighting, so he fought again. Different enemy, same determination. In 1921, Francis is elected chief of the Perry Island Band, now Wasauksing First Nation. He immediately clashes with the local Indian agent, John Daly. The Indian agents had near absolute power over First Nations communities. They controlled funds. They could override band council decisions. They were often corrupt and always unaccountable. Francis and his fellow councillors launched a letter-writing campaign demanding that elected band leaders have real power, not just ceremonial positions beneath white bureaucrats. Ottawa's response is to insist all communication go through the Indian agent, the same man Francis is trying to remove power from. Francis doesn't give up. He serves as chief from 1921-1925, then again from 1942-1945. He also serves as a councillor from 1933-1936. He continues his involvement with the military by joining the local militia, the 23rd Pioneers, serving as company sergeant major from 1930 to 1936. In 1943, Francis attends a national conference in Ottawa where the Native Independent Government is formed, one of the first national Aboriginal organizations in Canadian history. He becomes Supreme Chief of this organization in 1949-1950. He's fighting for the same things he fought for in the trenches: recognition, equality, justice. But this enemy is harder to fight than the Germans. You can't snipe a systemic injustice. You can't capture institutional racism. Francis corresponds with other Aboriginal leaders across Canada: Fred Loft, Jules Suey, Andrew Paul, John Tautusis. They're all trying to force Canada to live up to the principles it claimed to fight for in Europe: democracy, freedom, equality. But Francis's body is failing. The chlorine gas from Ypres in 1915 has been slowly destroying his lungs for 37 years. By the early 1950s, he can't lie down to sleep. His lungs fill with fluid if he does. He spends nights sitting upright in a chair, struggling to breathe. His family later says he rarely spoke about the war. Like many combat veterans, he kept the worst memories locked away. The few times he opened up were when other veterans visited. Then he would talk, not about the killing, but about the men who served beside him, the ones who died, the ones who came home changed. August 5th, 1952. Francis Pegahmagabow dies of a heart attack at age 61. His lungs, destroyed by German chlorine gas in 1915, finally give out. He's buried on the Wasauksing First Nation Reserve, close to where he was born, close to where Noah Nebimaniquad taught him to hunt, close to the forests where he learned the skills that would make him a legend in the trenches of France. His grave sits slightly apart from the main cemetery. Whether by design or accident, it's fitting. Francis spent his life between worlds: Ojibwe and Christian, warrior and peacemaker, decorated hero and non-citizen. Here's what makes Francis Pegahmagabow's story so important. He was the deadliest sniper of World War I. 378 confirmed kills, 300 captured prisoners, one of only 39 Canadians to receive the military medal with 2 bars, the most highly decorated Aboriginal soldier in Canadian history. But for decades, his story was barely known. Most World War I histories don't mention him. Most Canadians never learned his name in school. Why? Because history tends to remember the stories of people in power and forget everyone else. It took until 2003 for his medals to be donated to the Canadian War Museum. Until 2006 for his first memorial plaque. Until 2016, 64 years after his death, for a life-size bronze statue to be erected in his honor in Parry Sound. The statue shows Francis in his Canadian Expeditionary Force uniform, Ross rifle slung over his shoulder, an eagle on one arm, his spirit animal, a caribou at his feet, his clan, and the medicine pouch in his hand. The 3rd Canadian Ranger Patrol Group headquarters at CFB Borden now bears his name. The Canadian Forces finally recognized what his fellow soldiers knew in 1915. Francis Pegahmagabow was one of the finest warriors Canada ever produced. His great-grandson, Dr. Brian McInnes, has worked to ensure Francis's story is finally told. McInnes wrote a book called Sounding Thunder: The Stories of Francis Pegahmagabow, and helped create a touring musical about his life. Canadian power metal band Sabaton released a song about Francis in 2019 called A Ghost in the Trenches, because that's what he was, a ghost that German soldiers feared and couldn't kill. If this story moved you, if you think Francis Pegahmagabow deserves to be remembered alongside the most famous warriors in history, subscribe to this channel, hit that like button, share this video, because stories like this need to be told, and leave a comment. What other forgotten heroes from history should I cover next? Francis Pegahmagabow fought 2 wars, one against Germany, one against injustice in his own country. He never surrendered in either, and that's why his story matters.